It's official, Stage 2s are finally returning to the top tier of the Pokemon trading card game. Today we're going to be talking about the new Gardevoir EX from Scarlet and Violet, the archetype taking Japan by storm. I'll be breaking down the card itself, taking a look at what makes the deck tick, provide an example deck list to get started with your testing, and have a quick chat about Gardevoir's expected matchups in the post-rotation format. Let's get started. So Gardevoir EX is a Stage 2 Psychic-type Pokemon with a sizable 310 hit points, which might allow this Pokemon to get into the mix in the early game as an attacking option thanks to its bulk. Its attack, Miracle Force, isn't all that impressive, 190 damage for 3 energy, isn't that efficient, and has the small upside of being able to remove special conditions, but that's not too appealing either. However, this damage is enough to help tackle single prize Pokemon or two-shot multi-prizes comfortably, so it is an option to keep in mind, especially because the energy efficiency won't be too much of a concern once we break down Gardevoir's ability, the true selling point of this card. Psychic Embrace states, as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your psychic Pokemon. If you do, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. This ability will become the entire build around of this deck, as Psychic Embrace can help us maintain attackers throughout the game, and hopefully towards the later stages, once we've cycled through the deck, discarding Psychic Energy as we go, we can look to reach 1-hit KOs on our opponent's V-Star, V-Max, and EX Pokemon with our backup attackers. So the plan is simple, set up our Gardevoir EX, throw Psychic Energy into the discard pile, and yeet them back all into play, all in one go to obliterate the opponent. Let's have a look at who'll be benefiting most from this Psychic Embrace ability then. And oh look, it's another Gardevoir. How convenient. That's right, we're going to be dual-wielding Gardies in this deck. Gardevoir has the Brainwave attack, dealing 60 plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached to this Pokemon. Gardevoir has 140 hit points, which means we can shove 6 energy onto it with Psychic Embrace all in one go, bringing Brainwave up to an impressive 240 damage. And that's before taking into account turn attachments and other sneaky methods of acceleration this deck has available to it, Shining Arcana. This ability allows us to look at the top 2 cards and attach any number of basic energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Then draw the remaining cards, so even if we miss, we're still continuing to get hand advantage. Although this isn't reliable energy acceleration, it can sometimes tick us into 0-hit KO range, and since it draws cards anyway, it's an incredible single prize Pokemon to have in the deck, even though it is a glass cannon. We can also use a few healing cards to allow us to embrace even more onto our Gardevoir, ramping us into V-Star and even V-Max range in certain instances in a single turn. We're also going to be playing a copy of Zacian V, which shares the same attack effect as Brainwave from Gardevoir. However, the Zacian V provides a few key differences here. With 220 hit points, we don't need to be cute with Shining Arcanas, turn attachments, or involve any healing. We can simply shove as many energy as we like and blow up the opponent's active Pokemon. Also, because Zacian is a V, we have access to the Skyseal Stone tool card, as the deck does not naturally use a V-Star power, which means Zacian is not only a beat stick, but also a great way of us uptrading in the prize race. It's also worth mentioning that Zacian has the Roar of the Sword ability, which is surprisingly handy in the early game to pull Psychic Energy out of the deck, and also provide an early game threat whilst we build our Stage 2 army in the back. So those are the key attackers in the deck. Now we just need to figure out how to draw a bunch of cards whilst discarding energy as we go, and oh wait, there's a Kirlia that does all of those things. That's right, Gardevoir is truly a blessed evolution line, as we have refinement from Kirlia, which essentially means our whole strategy now becomes get our evolutions going as quickly as possible. And that was already our main strategy before, except now we get rewarded by drawing more and more cards as we set up. That means we're going to be playing a very thick line of our Gardevoirs and Kirlias, and we're also going to play a ton of Ball Search here. We're going to add in Battle VIP Pass, Level Balls, Ultra Balls, Rare Candies, and let's not forget that thanks to being a Psychic type, we get to use Fog Crystal here as well, which won't have the same diminishing returns as some of our other Ball Search cards, because it can be really handy at also fishing out Psychic Energy throughout the mid-game. So that's how we're going to get our gang into play as early as possible, but we're also going to add in a couple additional Pokemon here. Mysterious Tail Mew can be another great way for us to access even more of these items in the opening stages, and can also help piece together rare candy combos in the mid-game, whilst being the perfect punching bag protecting our Ralts on the bench. We're also going to throw in a Radiant Greninja for good measure to give us even more ways of discarding our energy cards and drawing through the deck. So that gives us a good picture of which item cards as well as Pokemon are going to be filling out our list. Now let's have a look at the supporters to round things out. Naturally, we're going to be playing a few gusting cards to help us have more control over our prize map. And we're also going to throw in a couple of Judge as a means of disruption. Normally this would be a double-edged sword for a Stage 2 deck, as it doesn't leave us with many cards, but as we've already established, Gardevoir's middle name is Draw. Next up, because Gardevoir EX has a rule box, and we're very reliant on its ability, we're going to throw in a couple of the Worker supporter in order to give us more bounces to Path of the Peak, whilst also providing a handy draw 3 option. Additionally, we're going to need some recovery, seeing as though we plan on continuously sending our heavily damaged Gardevoir into the firing line. For that we have Miriam, a new supporter from Scarlet and Violet, which allows us to choose up to 5 Pokemon from our discard pile and shuffle them back into our deck, then we draw 3 cards. Another great way of seeing extra cards and recycling our guys. You might be able to spot a bit of a theme here. We really like having draw 3 supporters in this deck. Despite being considered weaker than the likes of Professor's Research in conventional decks, these ones provide some integral secondary effects, and because we grow such a large hand size with our Kirlias and Gardevoirs, they seem to really fit the job nicely here. With all that said and done, here is our skeleton deck list. We've got the Gardevoir line and our honorary card draw helpers of Mew and Greninja, our Zacian and Skyseal Stone combo. Next up, we have our Bull Search and Rare Candies, and finally our supporters and energy cards. Now let's work on filling out those final few spots. Firstly, let's tackle stadiums. We're going to want a couple more bounces to Path of the Peak to be on the safe side, so let's add in a couple here. Champions Festival may well end up being the most effective option here, as it can allow us to use Psychic Embrace an additional time onto our single prize Gardevoir, allowing us to reach 270 damage just a turn attachment away from 300, which is very handy into V-Star Pokemon. Although, since these are quite expensive promos, I don't expect anyone to fork out for these, so I also think Temple of Sinnoh is a fun alternative here, seeing as though it can disrupt a number of special energy decks in the format, including Lugia and Mew. We're also going to commit a space to Manaphy. Seeing as though we have a lot of vulnerable single prize Pokemon sitting around our board, we want to protect ourselves from the likes of Radiant Greninja, which could be popping up in Lost Zone variants with Mirage Gate, or from Rapid Strike Urshifu as well. With all of our essentials covered, that leaves us with 3 spots to deal with the massive elephant in the room, Lost Box. Lost Box is going to continue to be a force in post-rotation format, and is a faster single prize deck with a variety of tricks up its sleeve, with Mirage Gate combos and Sableye at its disposal. It's in this matchup where the downside of Psychic Embrace is on full display. Leaving our Pokemon heavily damaged is easily pounced on by Sableye, and we simply can't afford to let that happen. That means we're going to throw in a couple of Uno reverse cards, namely Emergency Jelly of all things, and Cresselia. This combination gives us a lot of game into the Lost Zone decks. It gives us a way of using our single prize Guardies a lot more effectively here, as we're able to Psychic Embrace to the point of putting us only down to 20 hit points remaining, so that we can activate our own Emergency Jelly going into our opponent's turn. That means we can use Brainwave to score a knockout, and we still end up with 140 hit point single prizer in the active position, which is way out of range of a Cramorant or a Sableye, forcing our opponent to use Mirage Gate combos or 2 prize Pokemon within their deck. Cresselia can be another spanner in the works. It has 120 hit points, so can be an early game sponge against Cramorant, especially if the opponent is trying to utilize Escape Rope. We can nullify that damage, and again, this could be a use for Emergency Jelly. If your opponent is trying to get creative with their Sableye tactics, we can try and use Moonglow Reversed to foil their scheme. By the same merit, we can actually activate this ourselves using our own Psychic Embrace on a number of our Pokemon, helping to power them up, and simply Moonglow Reverse to take the damage counters off, once again trying to represent lots of high hit point single prizes and even our EX. Now, it's still likely that we're going to fall behind in a prize race against a Lost Zone player, simply because Cramorant is so fast and efficient, but with some chunky single prizes and a means of healing in different directions, whether we can go wide with Cresselia or single target removal with Jelly, it does create a much more difficult prize map for our opponents, giving us a fighting chance, especially when you consider the fact that we're going to try and throw Judge at our opponent's face to disrupt their flow. So there we have it, the final 60. It is pretty simplistic, but hopefully a great starting point for you all to try. I have put a number of games in with Gardevoir, and I'm confident that this is going to be a pretty reasonable starting point, and gives you some space to work with if you want to work in some other techs. Speaking of which, there are a few honourable mentions worth considering which haven't quite made the list that I'm going to go through now. A Mirage Step Kirlia is a handy backup if you have a rough start whiffing your Ball Search or VIP passes, and can still get you into the game with multiple Kirlias, with not much required in hand. This is one of those really helpful options when you have a bad hand, but when your deck is working smoothly, you'd much prefer this to be another Refinement Kirlia. We also have Gallade. The main reason I don't have this in the deck list is that you mostly want to evolve into your Gardevoirs, seeing as though the EX is the core essential part of the deck in terms of its ability, and one of your key main attackers is the other single prize Gardevoir. However, Gallade can add diversity to your supporter pool, and possibly allow you to add Palpad into your deck list so that you can spam these for the right moment. A Galarian Articuno could be another interesting single prize attacker that's just a basic, which means we have less reliance on finding multiple candies in the opening stages, and can still offer up a good amount of pressure, seeing as though the Articuno can also be self-sustaining and power itself up all in a turn, provided you have enough psychic energy in the hand. Klefki is a bit of a disruptive basic that you can add into your deck list if you wish to have some extra help slowing down a couple of engines in the game that revolve around basic abilities. Most notably will be Comfey and Genesect, but you also have the upside of disrupting the likes of Miraidon EX and Radiant Greninja at the same time, but be warned this will shut off some of your own engine Pokemon, so use this card wisely. Before I sign off, let's briefly discuss some matchups. We've already touched on the healing techs that we have for Lost Box, but let's not forget that Gardevoir EX can also put in a big shift with its natural bulk in this matchup. And remember to commit Ball Search to Manaphy in the opening couple of turns so that you can protect yourself from Mirage Gate Radiant Greninja plays that your opponent can make to try and have multi-prize turns. It's also important in this matchup to evolve all of your Kirlias into Guardies if you can help it, rather than have them around just using Refinement to give you card advantage. It's much more important for you to create that difficult prize map for the opponent. By that same merit, Judge is also going to be one of your best friends here. Ideally, you use this on a turn where you're throwing a tanky Pokemon into the active, where they can't simply use a Cramorant or Sableye to tackle it, so that then you are forcing them to find Mirage Gate combos under a small hand size. Against Mew, we only need to attack a couple of times in the game thanks to our Zacian Skyseal Stone combo, so finding a 2-prize KO first is usually the best approach we can take here, as it helps us avoid the Roxanne turn from our opponents. They're likely to be playing Path of the Peaks and sometimes even Lost City, so keeping an eye on your stadiums and worker count is really important. Ultimately, prioritise draw in this matchup as much as possible, as Zacian can really make up for an early prize deficit. In theory, Lugia shouldn't be too challenging of a matchup. They're naturally forced into putting multiple multi-prize Pokemon into play, so uptrading should be relatively straightforward. Do be aware that Tyranitar V can remove resources from your deck, so don't go too crazy cycling through, and keep an eye on your Miriam count, because they can catch you out if they discard the right pieces. Against Miraidon Regieleki players, we're once again playing catch-up. It's likely that the opponent will start out using their Lightning Wall, which really hinders our early pressure that we can try and put on, but let's not forget that once again we can end with a Zacian V Skyseal Stone Flourish here, so try not to get too bogged down in the prize race, and be aware that Gust is once again going to be a great way around Lightning Wall to score some easier knockouts. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion on Gardevoir EX. Let me know your thoughts down below. Is this deck going to be one of the top contenders, or do you think it's going to be a little bit too clunky as a Stage 2 deck in a Lost Box world? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.